It's been 11 years since the release of Shadow of Chernobyl. What began as an idea since the turn of the 2000s became hindered by delays and leaks throughout the years. Come 2007, it was finally released and to much acclaim. By 2008, it had sold over 2 million copies worldwide. 2008 also saw the release of the second game, Clear Sky, and 2010 released Call of Pripyat. S.T.A.L.K.E.R had become a successful and worldwide sensation by a little-known developer from Ukraine, renowned for its complex AI, open-world gameplay, and for the zone's atmosphere and setting. And throughout the past 11 years, the popularity of S.T.A.L.K.E.R has never really faded. Sure, at different points in time there's been highs and lows, but the modding community for S.T.A.L.K.E.R has perhaps surpassed the games themselves. From minor improvements to major overhauls, the fans of S.T.A.L.K.E.R have kept its legacy alive and expanded the series to an even broader audience. 2016 saw Call of Chernobyl win Mod of the Year on ModDB, and Old Good S.T.A.L.K.E.R Evolution won Editor's Choice for Best Single Player Mod. Previous years saw many other nominations for various mods as well. And people are still looking forward to innovative mods like Gunslinger, Ray of Hope, and Radium. But even with all the enjoyment you might get from mods like OGSC, Call of Chernobyl, Misery, Lost Alpha, and S.T.A.L.K.E.R Soup, there's still something that's been missing all these years. What happened to S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2? Call of Pripyat was released 8 years ago. S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 was announced in 2010 and scheduled for 2012. Yet in April 2012, S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 was said to be cancelled, and this time for good. This wasn't a sudden turn of events though, as GSC had been plagued by troubles for a while now. Throughout the years of GSC's existence, especially during their time dedicated to S.T.A.L.K.E.R, countless delays, leaks, workplace conflicts, and employees leaving for other studios crippled GSC. It's impossible to know the extent of what happened inside their offices, but soon enough, the company ran out of both manpower and funding. GSC had effectively closed down, and along with it, so did the dream of S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2. Yet ever since the announcement of S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2's halt in mid-2012, there's been a slow but constant trickle of leaks about the game, revealing the progress they had made and what could have been. These previously hidden textures, models, maps, concept art, and writing have been shared to the public, even up until 2017. Today we're going to go through much of these leaks, piecing together the story and image of this indefinitely delayed game. This is the untold story of S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2. So before we get into talking about the story and everything, there's a few disclaimers to announce. This is obviously going to have a lot of spoilers from all three current games to of course everything that happens in S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2. That's of course obvious and I shouldn't need to say this, but if I don't, there'll be at least one person complaining about spoilers, so you've been warned. Secondly, I wouldn't have been able to make this video without all the information being shared on various fan sites for S.T.A.L.K.E.R. So I'll be sure to list my sources in the description, and a big thank you to the people that have dedicated hours to sharing this information. The main reason I wanted to make this video is that although there's a lot of information to read and watch regarding S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2, there's no video about it in English. Also worth mentioning is that the majority of the information has been translated from Russian to English, so bear with me if I misinterpret something and inevitably mispronounce some Russian names. There is a lot of leaked content to troll through, so I'm going to be showing concept art and models while I talk about the story, since that's the main interest. Also keep in mind that this was written in 2009 to 2010, so it's possible that the story was completely rewritten in 2011 and 2012, but this is what we have. I haven't been able to find any other source of the story other than on AP Pro, so I'm going to assume that this information is reliable. The game begins with the protagonist constantly having this one dream. His wife wants him to go see a psychologist, but he says there is only one place where I can understand this dream, and of course he means the zone. It transitions to your character in a bus travelling towards the zone, with some other stalkers discussing their motivations for entering. The bus arrives at the Research Institute of the Chernobyl Anomalous Zone. A nearby stalker tells the protagonist that the institute hires individuals for work, but not himself since he's been blacklisted. It is the quickest way to get into the zone legally. This establishes a few things in S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 already. The entrance into the zone is legal and regulated through the Research Institute ran by a faction basically called the Scientists. who play a significant role in the plot of Stalker 2. Here on this leaked map for Stalker 2, you can see the Institute acts as the main checkpoint in and out of the zone. That doesn't mean every person that enters the zone is there due to the Institute, because there's a lot of reference to illegal and legal stalkers. Obviously some are licensed to work here and others aren't. The checkpoint is a small research town, and you're told to see the chief scientific consultant who personally selects the stalkers who can enter the zone. You come to their office, which says Streletsky Pavel Konstantinovich. I think you know where this is going. The room is filled with documents and an artifact container, and of course Strelok, the consultant. He asks you why you want to enter the zone and for your qualifications. You tell him that you were in the zone about 10 years ago and that you've come to learn more about the dream that you've been having. He says that you can be a temporary employee and gives you a task, is to deliver a parcel to Doctor. Strelok is interrupted by the chief of security who enters the room. Strelok finishes by saying to meet him back here at 11 PM for further instructions. You wait in a bar and some locals begin to ask a group which had returned from the zone some questions. The information you learn is that generally freedom has become more widespread and work with others more commonly, while duty has become less powerful and a bit more isolated. So we can see already that the factions of the zone have changed over time. You're awoken by your alarm and go to see Strelok again. You see him upstairs in his room from outside as you approach and notice a weird glow from his office. An anomaly suddenly manifests inside, melting and warping the room and killing Strelok. People are awoken by the event and assume you are responsible. They proceed to knock out and imprison you. You awake in a cell, with a guard noticing you're awake and berating you for killing Strelok, saying that Strelok was a great man and that you'll be interrogated tomorrow. You then later notice a man by a window who beckons to you. He gives you a respirator, chucks in a smoke grenade, and rescues you from the room. You recognize that man as the one that talked to you on the ride here. You two then proceed to sneak past the Institute's perimeter into the actual zone. He rescued you as he believes that you're not responsible for killing Strelok. You manage to escape the military at the Institute and hide at a water tower where you meet up with 3 other stalkers. You tell them what happened and one recommends you go north to the city to see the barman. You wake up in the morning and proceed to travel north through a ravine to the city. I'd like to mention that the names of areas in the main story leak and the map translation are pretty much the same, so I'll do my best to track the progress through the video, but you can download the map in the description and follow along at your own pace. In the ravine, you end up fighting off a pack of mutant dogs. You are told you should collect their ears as duty will pay a bounty on mutant parts. You arrive near the city and get introduced to your first artifacts and anomalies. You get given a detector as well as a filtered gas mask, suggesting that it's likely and necessary to have hazard protection in Stalker 2 rather than it being occasional in the other Stalker games. You arrive at the city and the bar is the 100 Rads bar, just like from Shadow of Chernobyl. The city itself grew around it and expanded. This is also the first legal settlement in the zone thanks to the Institute, although there's no real authority in the city, so it is a refuge to a lot of illegals as well. You go into the bar and there's a reference to Gar and Zor, so I assume the brothers Gary and Zorik are reunited and working at the bar again. There's also reference to a stalker named Spartacus, who I assume is the same from Zaton. The barman then shows a picture of you saying that there's a bounty on your head and kicks you out, not wanting trouble in his bar. So since the city is essentially on the Rostock bar area, I guess then the Research Institute is maybe on the cordon or garbage if we go by the geography of the map. Rostock on the map uses the same building texture, but to the south it's all new, so I'm going to assume that the Institute's town was either built over the cordon or at least nearby. Outside of a bar you hear some mercenaries talking about you, waiting for you to leave the city to collect the bounty. A nearby stalker with a sniper suggests you should get out of the city and should head towards the outskirts. You move to the outskirts of the city through a hangar when you are confronted by some bandits. Someone from outside the building snipes one bandit and you're stuck in a shootout with them. Some stalkers then come in to help, with one of them being the stalker who told you to leave the city earlier. They say they're all veteran stalkers who are also illegals and are also looking for Doctor. They say he might be at the duty base since there's a lot of wounded and offer to take you with him. The duty base is the southeast corner of the map. As you approach the duty base, there's countless attacking mutants, injured stalkers, and fortifications. You head to the infirmary where you meet a doctor, but not the doctor. Doctor had left, but he was talking to a heavily wounded stalker in the infirmary. Turns out it was the one that helped you through the perimeter. You learn Doctor is at the village in the swamps, which appears to be north of the duty area on the map. You arrive at the swamp with the same group of stalkers. In the swamp you see a dog which isn't hostile, but you're not sure if it's Doctor's. You also find an old sick person who said Doctor went further into the swamp to look for a type of grass. The stalkers get violent with a wounded person. They knock you out unconscious after the injured man says nothing. You awake to the stalkers talking and planning to ambush the doctor and capture him. Turns out these were mercenaries in disguise. The mercenary leader takes you as a human shield and goes to confront the doctor, who tells them to leave you unharmed and that the locals won't kill them. The mercenary points a gun at the doctor, then his hand gets shot. You take his gun and join the firefight. After the shootout, many stalkers in camouflage emerge from various bushes. Doctor talks to you, saying he knows why mercenaries are after him but not you. You explain what happened to S.T.A.L.K.E.R and give him a parcel. Inside the parcel is an Institute card which can open a lab in the zone, but there's no coordinates. Doctor says that he knew S.T.A.L.K.E.R suspected that something was wrong with the Institute. S.T.A.L.K.E.R was constantly being excluded from research and that his curiosity had gotten him killed. On a mercenary there's a small map with a marker. You head there to learn more about them. The marker leads to a small underground bunker filled with weapons, ammo, communications and outfits for each faction. There's also a picture of you pinned on the wall. If you look in the middle of the map, it looks like the mercenary's hideout now serves as your personal base. Doctor manages to contact the mercenary's customer on the radio, saying that you've been killed and that Doctor couldn't be found. The customer also mentions Leshy, who confirms that the plan was to impersonate stalkers and to use you to locate Doctor and kill both of you. The customer then says that the Freedom Technician has another device for you, to take it to some coordinates and to run a signal from there. You head west to the Freedom base. The technician is a nervous and odd fellow. When you mention you've come for the package, he goes to another room to get it and then suddenly attempts to escape. You chase after him and he climbs up a large antenna. You rescue him from falling. After you do so, he says he refuses to do any more missions which will help kill stalkers. You tell him you're not one of the mercenaries and are trying to investigate the murders. He agrees to help and says that if you discover who the customer is, to tell Barman since he has outside connections which can help. I'm assuming this package needs to be set up at the stash of a mysterious customer spot directly south of a Freedom camp on the map. You go there, signal the device and wait for the customer. You see several people in white overalls approaching and one in civilian clothing. The group opens fire on you and you capture the customer alive. The customer surrenders and hands over his notes for you to read. It's the diary of a senior lab assistant and his research, and how S.T.A.L.K.E.R became more and more interested in his work. The assistant was jealous of S.T.A.L.K.E.R and eventually came to hate him. He complained about this to the head of the laboratory, and the security chief said that if he were to give him an artifact in a container, that the chief would protect him from S.T.A.L.K.E.R. This obviously suggests that the security chief is the one responsible for S.T.A.L.K.E.'s death. Although it seems clear that S.T.A.L.K.E.R was expecting something like this given how he acted when the security chief interrupted your initial meeting. The customer was worried he would be found responsible for S.T.A.L.K.E.'s death, but he reasons that S.T.A.L.K.E.R was bad because he wanted to steal his research. With this information, you decide to tell Barman about the plot of the security chief. You then head back to the 100 Rads bar, where you again meet your old friend who had helped you into the zone and who was at the duty infirmary. The barkeep learns of the information, goes away to make some calls, and then returns telling you that tomorrow there will be some arrest and an investigation will begin at the Institute. He asks you to return there to give a witness statement. He gives you a certificate of a legal stalker so you can take a bus back, which happens to be Dekhtyrev's. On the bus ride back, you're accompanied by more stalkers who were successful in the zone, when suddenly the bus is rocked by an RPG. More people in white uniforms storm out of a forest towards you, beginning a firefight. After killing the last one of them, you fall unconscious. You wake back at the bar with your companions again. There had been a leak that you were returning which led to the ambush. In the evening, Dekhtyrov comes to the 100 Rads bar, saying how they were too late and that the security chief had escaped. But the security chief didn't manage to destroy his belongings, and they discovered information about a lab further into the zone and something called Project Harvest, and that the time to conduct experiments in the zone is near. Doctor decides that you and he should go to this laboratory in disguise as inspectors. Barman organises for a helicopter to escort you there, and Doctor has a proper fake ID and uniforms. On the surface, there is a normal mobile science bunker. You then take an elevator down from the bunker into X3 and are showed all the various experiments relating to the noosphere, anomalies, artifacts, and mutants. As you're finishing up, you see the security chief through a window. He calls a guide showing you around, who then pulls a pistol on you. Doctor disarms him, and then you proceed to shoot your way out of the laboratory. You arrive back at the bar and notice the city has a lot more people in it than usual. A large Freedom detachment has come to talk to Barman. You also see duty guards running into the bar as a response to seeing their rivals. There's a big discussion between you, Doctor, Barman, and the duty leader talking about the whole incident. That you infiltrated the science lab because you were suspicious of a scientist being corrupt, and that you only killed them in self-defense. Doctor adds that he learned more about this Project Harvest, which is a way to create a constant and reliable source of artifacts. The duty leader asks why the Freedomers are here. Barman tells him that Freedom has had a rebellion as many no longer trusted their leader, Lukash. They discovered that he was smuggling his artifacts to the outside world through the Research Institute, rather than handing them over to be researched. He was also purchasing expensive military equipment and moving it deeper north into the zone. There's also messages from Lukash to someone outside of the zone that he'll soon be able to greatly increase the number of artifacts that he's selling, so this obviously points towards Lukash working with a corrupt part of the scientists. He likely used Freedom to do his bidding for a long time until they wisened up to his plans. He's now more like a bandit or mercenary leader given the faction split. A large discussion follows between you, Barman, Doctor, Doktarev and the Freedom and Duty leaders. I've shortened it since it's confusing because of all the scientific terms and because it's been translated. Essentially, it boils down to that anomalies are the imprint of a noosphere's radiation. They are concentrated waves of information that change matter itself. An emission is essentially a mass radiation from all the anomalies as they're a type of information node. The intent of Project Harvest is to focus all the anomalous waves at one point and bombard them with objects to receive endless artifacts. There is a device which can do this, and the Freedom Leader and Duty Leader argue that this could be used to control the zone or destroy it. Both Doctor and Barman agree to destroy the device, but there's no mention of its location. It's massive, but it isn't on the surface, otherwise it would be located already. Both the Freedom and Duty Leader offer a few men for the task. Doktarev mentions that there is an SBU camp very close by to the CMPP. They recently detected a laboratory which has nearby large antennas, like what's in the Project Harvest documents. You travel to the SBU camp, which is a very well fortified and isolated base. Regular stalkers are not welcome. It consists of the military and researchers. The base leader gives you a key to the laboratory to investigate it. He says that the antenna isn't active, but there's still a strong field of radiation at the lab, so you will not be able to stay for long. You fight through mutants and a large crowd of zombies to the lab. You discover documents revealing that the lab worked on antennas which are designed to transfer information to the noosphere. This confirms that the lab is tied to Project Harvest. As you enter deeper into the lab, a door seals behind you and you find a note which says, "It's your own fault that you put your nose where it doesn't belong." Through a surveillance camera you see the ex-Freedom Leader and a group of stalkers in white uniform. You manage to find your way out through ventilation ducts. One of your comrades succumbs to the psi radiation and you discover the cause was a controller, which you promptly kill. As you make it out, you see Lukash and his men leaving, who you chase after. You pursue him and along the way he sacrifices his men to attempt to escape you, the mutants and anomalies. Right before he manages to escape, Doctor's pseudo-dog tackles him. You're then able to interrogate him, learning more about Freedom, its history, coordinates of the antenna installation, as well as information about a mole in the SBU camp. You then proceed back to your hideout where you prepare for the final mission. You can choose between telling Barkeep, Duty or Freedom about the location, which affects who will help you and likely the ending. As you approach the installation, the project starts to commence. You battle your way through to the antenna installation to finally come across the security chief in the control room. He's in a protective suit and opens some shutters in the room hoping the psi radiation and anomalies will kill you. The ending took a while to understand, but here's what essentially happens. You go to shoot him, and then a wave of anomalous energy fills the room with the shutters being half open. You both kind of fall backwards and can seem to fly. Both of you leave a translucent statue or outline of where you were standing. You then proceed to wrestle with him and manage to get the security chief outside of a room through the shutters. They proceed to close, then you snap back to your original positions and shoot him. He dies. His keyring falls from his hand and breaks on the ground, and that's the last thing you hear, as the game cuts to black. What I assume happens is that given the massive amount of nearby power from the noosphere and anomalies, you and the security chief have what is essentially an out-of-body experience, a psychic battle in the noosphere, before you can resolve what's going on in the geosphere. Now that's all for the main storyline. There's probably a lot of questions and a lot of people thinking that the game sounds linear. This is just the summary for the main plot though. It only mentions the main plot points and not what's in between them. When you combine the main plot outline with the map, you can see that there's a lot of side quests and a lot of travel in between the main points of the story. Another post on the same site suggests that there's 157 side quests, which is definitely a lot more than any of the other games, probably more than all three combined. If you look at the map, nearly all those circles on the map are side quests for you to do, with the varying colours representing a specific faction each. Another thing is that although I think the main story that I just read is accurate since it does corroborate what's on the map and from what I've read of a Russian video about Stalker 2 which has been translated, there's also a lot of information that we're not told obviously. The Russian video mentions that there's a deadly virus going around infecting hundreds of stalkers, and that S.T.A.L.K.E.R isn't actually dead, but a clone of his was. And that the sea consciousness never was destroyed, and that S.T.A.L.K.E.R in Call of Pripyat and the one that becomes a chief scientific consultant is a sea consciousness agent. Now this is all possible. I have nothing that disagrees with this from what I've read on AP Pro. In the description will be the Reddit thread that translates the video, but I couldn't find any sources from the actual video for me to confirm any of it. There is a sea consciousness lab on the map, but that doesn't really imply that they're there, just that they were there. It suggested that this was a part of a different draft of the story in the translated video, so I can't confirm or deny any of it really. I wouldn't be surprised if they made a twist like this though, but it has no effect since it's all drafts of a leak of a cancelled game. There's also constant mention of a protagonist dreaming. Sure, there's the one at the start, but in between many of the main quests it mentions that you dream pretty much every time you sleep. Although it doesn't say what these dreams are, and I feel without them we miss out a lot on the character's backstory and motivations. The dreams in Shadow of Chernobyl definitely help contribute a lot of the information about the plot and S.T.A.L.K.E.R, although initially cryptic. We don't even truly know why the main character entered the zone, just that he was called to it, and we get no real closure for the character either way, just a nameless character to facilitate the story. Either way, I found the story pretty fun to read, although it is hard to properly assess without the whole picture. What are your thoughts? In my opinion, it doesn't feel like a Stalker story in some ways though. It feels more like I'm playing a campaign for Metro or Bioshock, since the story seems quite straightforward and it feels like there's a lot more cutscenes than the other Stalker games. There seems to be a lot more hand-holding than previous games, giving you always know specifically what to do and for the most part have NPCs take you there. There's a lot of moments where you have to follow an NPC through many scripted sequences, and that isn't what S.T.A.L.K.E.R is about in my opinion. It feels like they were maybe trying to draw inspiration from a lot of other single player shooters at the time, rather than do what they did best. If a game were to be released now with a current story, I feel it would be alright, but I feel it falls into the same trap as Half-Life 3 would. A sequel that's never going to come out, which is put on a pedestal because of never-ending hype. The stories in S.T.A.L.K.E.R were always fun, but they were never the main part in my opinion. They were there to facilitate the liveliness and atmosphere of the zone, to connect you with interesting Stalker characters, and to send you out on tasks to explore, investigate, fight and loot. One thing to note is that there's no mention of a monolith at all in the main storyline, while there's at least a few side quests regarding them on the map. I assume this is because they're even smaller than in Call of Pripyat and more of a nuisance than danger. Another thing is the Drifters gang on the map. There's no mention of them, but I suppose there may be a gang of illegal stalkers or more friendly bandits. Another thing worth mentioning is that it feels like S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 wanted squad mechanics. There seemed to be a massive amount of missions where you would either follow someone or you would travel with a squad from one point to another, and I feel that they would have put in squad commands, or at least being able to convince other people to follow you to make that more interesting. Nothing guaranteed, just kind of an inclination from what I've got reading it. I wasn't fond of a cliffhanger ending. It doesn't give you any closure at all, so I'm assuming they were planning to make another sequel after S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2. Although I think there's a large chance that after the end there'd be a slideshow of how our choices in the game impact the ending, just like Call of Pripyat. The setting as a whole is pretty interesting and is a convincing change after Call of Pripyat. The zone becomes more corporatized and less wild, with this research institute getting to choose who can and can't enter. They also obviously work alongside the mercenaries as well as Lukash and his group. This game seemed like it had a lot more writing behind it in terms of how factions operated and changed, with loners themselves being split apart legal and illegal, causing the illegal loners to be more like bandits most likely. Both duty and freedom are different too. Freedom seems more successful and cooperative with others, while duty seems solely focused on killing mutants, while still holding onto that age-old rivalry. I feel a lot of these changes impact the openness and amount of choices in the game though. There's no real sign of you getting to align with one faction specifically, except for who to side with in the end. You can obviously work a lot with various factions, but I get the feeling that when they were writing the story, they wanted you to experience it in mostly one way. So I guess S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 does feel relatively more linear to its predecessors, but still has more choice than most other modern shooters. Now, I don't believe we'll see S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 released in the future, and by the small chance that we do, I don't really have that much faith in it. Not because I don't want another S.T.A.L.K.E.R game, but because pretty much all the original S.T.A.L.K.E.R team has left GSC Game World, and I don't reckon Sergey will ever let go of the game's IP. So if S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 were to be made right now, it would be by a studio missing most of the team which made the series great, with probably a story completely different to the one I just read because it's all been leaked. And I'm also confident they would need a lot of external funding. While something like crowdfunding might work, I see a publisher as a more likely route, and that could potentially negatively impact how the game is made. So that's all there really is to cover. Hopefully the video has been interesting, informative, and entertaining. I've gone over the story, shown many images from what the game would have looked like, and have talked about the zone's change in general since Call of Pripyat. Hopefully now most of you know the truth of what Stalker 2 was meant to be, and could have been. Hope you enjoyed, have a nice day, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.